Welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. My name is Janine Gallizia, and this week I would like to talk about structure. Structure is not composition or design. It's sort of a little bit in between. So if you have done a course with me or you're involved in my lives, you're going to know structure is a fundamental that I teach and that I absolutely do believe massively changes a person's painting. It can skyrocket your painting results even though your technique stays the same. So it's something that honestly is so beneficial for everybody and usually is the answer for a lot of people who find that they have issues with something wrong with their painting and they can't really put their finger on it. Let's paint. For this first subject, I'm going to take a landscape. It's a pretty simple landscape because I want to be pretty clear on how this works. We're looking for one big shape. That's what the structure is. It's one big shape that has an interesting pattern, an interesting design. This is where it sort of combines composition and design together. So let's just start simply and work our way up. Let's put in basically what we have, the subject as we see it, all right? So I'm going to just throw in this little building into the sort of middle ground, sort of a bit like this, changing the design a little bit, the subject a little bit. It doesn't matter, it's just the idea. Okay, let's just say that's my building. I see there's a wall behind. Let's just be very basic and just make a horizontal line here. That's that little wall. Then there's a line of trees coming behind, coming across. Okay, basically like this. Don't worry about the lavender in the beginning. We're just in the foreground. I just want this idea of structure to be seen. So if this is my subject, okay, this is the actual subject that I have, I need to identify the structure in the subject that I already have. This is an easy one. The structure actually already works. In some cases, you actually have to change it. But first of all, we have to understand how it works. The idea is to either look at the image, squint your eyes to try and find if and how the mid values or mid to dark values actually connect. And you're wanting to glue them together to create one big shape. And that way, when you look at the subject, you don't have individual subjects, a house, trees, mountain, let's say there's a path, let's say maybe even there's a car. You don't have individual objects in your paintings. Your paintings are actually one coherent big shape which combines all of the different objects or subjects in your painting that you're actually connecting, and then you're putting your details in, you're putting all the smaller details in, but they actually work together. So if I was trying to find the structure in this subject, all I would need to do is either, if I'm outside, take a photo of the subject, turn it into black and white, and you're going to see the structure pretty easily. If that doesn't work, just squint your eyes and try and find it. What I'm looking for is where the light values and the darker values join. And I'm wanting to find a block, how I can basically connect them. So if I was doing this shape, I can see that the light value of the sky is basically stopped, if you like. And there's a new darker value here in the mountain, but it's also darker value where the tree is, and then darker value where the mountain is. Now I'm just looking for the outer shape. I'm not looking for all of the little shapes inside. We're talking about a big shape. Therefore, I'm talking about the big exterior outline of these darker shapes combined. So this is going to bring the next tree in, the mountain, and it's connecting them. It's bringing them into the same shape. All right, so if I was just to say, okay, yeah, I can see that they're all connected. They're the darker shapes. There are different tonal values, but they sort of sit together. I'm wanting to connect now the background with the house, because otherwise this house will float. It will be separate. So what I might do is, this is why I actually put a bigger facade on this side of the house, because what I would like to do is to actually have a darker value here. This is where sometimes you need to modify your subject. Say there's a darker value here, so this connects. So this connects to my house. Maybe, look at that, there's a little shadow going under the roof, which goes into the door. So this is becoming almost like a thread or a snake or a line, which is continuous, doesn't get broken, and it weaves its way in and out. Maybe that tree comes forward, in and out of the subject until it literally attaches all of the subject inside this big shape. So if I was to do the foreground of this one, I think it would be nice to have some more light on the ground, because there's a very strong light on the building and almost none on the lavender. So I'm going to exaggerate my light source here, and I'm going to put this in the shadow. And look at this, I'm connecting the background, the trees, so the hill on the background, the trees, into the middle ground. It's connecting into the facade of the house, into the shadow under the roof, into the doorway, and obviously back out here and down into the foreground. To see what that looks like, you can either just add some shading like I did, if you want to check to actually see what it looks like, because it's less obvious like this. When you throw a wash on top of it, it just becomes so much more obvious. Ideally, the wash is going to be a mid value, even a mid to dark value, for it to be more visible. If you're doing it with a light value, it's less visible because there's less contrast. So I'm going to throw on a darker value just so we can see how these shapes are connecting. And you're going to see it straight away that all of these shapes can leave some brushwork that suggests the trees. And look what I'm doing. I'm literally dragging this same wash right across where those shapes are. I don't need to separate them. I really want them to connect. Therefore, I'm doing it straight away. I do not need to make them separate from the beginning. And if I don't make them separate from the beginning, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to have a more unified painting. And what I'm looking for is an interesting shape. That's all. It doesn't have to look like a landscape. It doesn't have to look like trees. It can look abstract. It doesn't have to look like something. It just needs to be interesting. And this is what people will see, hopefully, when they look at my paintings, is this big shape. As long as I make it interesting, from afar, my painting is already going to interest the spectators, the public, whoever they are, and make them want to move forward to take a closer look at my painting. This does not take any talent whatsoever. It just takes a little bit of understanding and just that idea of connecting the shapes in your paintings. So with this one big shape, it literally attaches every single part of the painting to create one bigger shape. From there, all I need to do is add differing tonal values, darker, change colors, and the painting will actually start to come into play. So, you know, I can add a darker value for my trees. You're going to see this just absolutely creates the painting with almost no effort. It's not necessarily necessary to go as dark as I did. It's just for the camera. It just makes it so much easier for you to see. But you can do this value lighter. It can be your light to mid value. I'm exaggerating it a little bit just in its tonal value, like I said, so you can see it. But can you see how easy it is now? Just to fit the rest of the subject in, and what happens? Our subject will, in an extremely basic, fundamental way, just appear. Just quite literally appear. You can change colors, you can add details, and just finish the painting as you desire. And you're going to find you've got a little painting, and it's all connected. And let's put a shadow on this one, some details, Even a little bit of shadow on that one to break it up, because it's just a big shape which is perhaps not too interesting. A little bit of detail, and with almost nothing on the paper, there's already something that's appearing. All right, so that's basically what the structure is. It's one big giant continuous shape that connects all other shapes in the paintings. It works on every single subject. There's no subject that it doesn't work on. It can be a marine, it can be a landscape like this, it can be a portrait even. It will work on every single painting. It's just the difference in tonal values that makes something seen or less seen. So it really does depend on where you want that visibility to be. And from almost nothing, you've easily got a little painting. You haven't changed your ability to paint, your technique hasn't changed, but the result will be better. All right, let's go and try something a little bit more testing, a little bit more, let's just say complex in its subject. For this next one, what I want to do is something so much more complicated to show you also how the structure can actually help you simplify the subjects that you have. So here we are in Rome with an extremely complicated subject, but it doesn't matter how complicated the subject is. The moment that you actually focus on the structure, you actually simplify the subject, and it makes a stronger painting. So again, this is just a very, very quick example of how you can use the structure even when the subject is super complicated. One, to simplify the subject, but to keep that that continuity, so that you're not cutting your subject into little bits. In this case, it would be the buildings, maybe a separate one for the bridge, maybe a separate one for the water, or even you go so far as wanting to actually separate the subject into multiple little different buildings. So let's just throw in a very, very rough suggestion of what's going on here. Okay, don't even need to worry about the rest of it. It's just basically the silhouette that I'm looking for coming onto the bridge. There's other buildings. I don't even need to worry about them, to be perfectly honest, to get this message across. Let's go for the bridge. Okay, put these arches in. Not paying much attention to the proportions, to be perfectly honest. Sometimes when you just want to do exercises to get your painting better, whether it be focusing on structure, tonal values, or whatever, don't worry too much about the details, don't worry too much about the drawing, just get the idea down. Because if you're focusing too much on the subject, you're going to lose the reason why you're actually doing the exercise in the first place. So I think you can see I've actually already drawn the structure out. I can connect every single shape, every single building, every single tree, every single object. But in the photo you will see, and this is the reason why I chose this photo, that the tonal value of the buildings is very similar to the bridge, which is actually very similar to the water, and that doesn't work, okay? If I've got the same tonal value for subjects which are next to each other, that's actually going to make it harder for anyone to see anything. So what I would need to do is make sure there is a different tonal value in each area for it to be visible. So in this case, what I think I will do is do sort of a light to mid value in the background, perhaps a lighter value in the bridge, and perhaps a darker value in the water, or vice versa. But there needs to be a difference in tonal value, otherwise dark next to dark, can't see the shapes. Light next to light, you can't see the shapes. Light next to dark, you can see the shapes. Okay, so it's the contrast which makes the subject visible. All right, so let's go with this one. Again, we're not going to do a sky, we're just going to throw on a value and create a block, create that overall structure. So I don't need to worry about details, I don't need to worry about tonal values or much at all, as long as I'm keeping this fairly light, so that I do gain light values. I do keep some of my light values. You don't want to go too dark with it.
And I'm just throwing this on. I'm painting the silhouette. If I'm doing a painting, I would actually create more variation in tonal values, but to show you the principle, simple, straight to the point is probably better. Don't want to create too many whites because they then attract the eye too much. Okay. Okay, keeping that fluidity going just so that the transparency is maintained. And we want that fluidity, that visual fluidity, so it's obviously nicer when you have a transparent wash that actually literally brings the color from one subject to another. All right, so here the colors can change, the tonal values can change. They don't have to always be the same. Okay, let's put some blue in there. Just so you see, they don't necessarily always need to be the same color, but what we're doing is we're quite literally attaching one subject to another. I can go back in and add some more color, gonna add darker values, but it's a continuity in the wash. Okay, that's really what we're looking for. And sometimes some subjects just don't have it. You may have a tree on one side, a tree on the other side, and you're gonna have to figure out how to connect them. It may be through the background, it may be through a shadow, through maybe by adding background trees. So sometimes you will need to modify the subject, simplify it, or add extra shapes just so that continuity occurs. All right, look how easy this is. So I can make a really sloppy technique, doesn't matter, because as long as the structure works, the painting will work. That's what's so amazing with this. This is why it will revolutionize people's paintings with almost no effort. You really don't need a good technique to do this. Oops, my brush disconnecting. All you need to do is that continuity using fluid washes. Adding some detail just so it looks nicer. Maybe add a little building in there. Okay, just making it look a little bit nicer. I'm slightly fixing odd shapes that don't look nice, just to get a nicer all over feel. But I cannot have the same tonal value here as here, otherwise my bridge won't be visible. So I either have to go lighter than this value or darker than this value. Either one works. So let's go. I think in this case I'll actually go darker. Now that I see it, I'll go darker. All right, I will use my burnt sienna and a little bit of a perylene violet. All right, and let's go darker still. Let's bring some ultramarine in there. Okay, and I want it darker, but don't forget your water because you want it to stay transparent. Look at that. Okay, nice, deep, rich color. And get those shapes in. Now it doesn't need to be dark everywhere. Basically it needs to be dark next to the light value. I could go lighter as I move down. I can even bring some of that color to create that continuity up into the building. You're going to see how simple this becomes, and it becomes a no-brainer. Honestly, it's such a no-brainer. If you can understand structure from one day to another, you will have improved your paintings. And this is actually, when I judge shows, one of the weakest elements that I see in most people's paintings. Too many individual shapes that are not connected, too many shapes that just sort of float and don't look like they actually belong. You can see they were in the subject, so they're being painted in, but there's no actual connection or understanding of how they belong to the bigger picture. All right. So maybe we can go, we've got blue up there, so let's bring a bit of that blue down here into the bridge and keeping that quite dark. It's actually very dark. All right. And I'll go back in and just clean up some of these edges that are a little bit messy. Okay. And then again, I can't have the same value in the bridge and in the water because you won't see it. But I'm not going to go for this value either, because otherwise it will be a mid value, a dark value, and a mid value. So what I will do is perhaps I'll just put in a light value. Let's throw a light value in, a really, really light value. This is basically just a little bit of ultramarine with a lot of water to get that transparency and fluidity in, but with a lighter value. Okay. Maybe even get rid of this one. This is a really quick sketch. You could let the paper dry so that you leave a little bit of these arches visible, but I just want to show you this connecting idea. Obviously doing it nicer if it was for a painting. You see how this sort of kind of falls together? Now here we're looking at values which are pretty much this, or a bit too similar. So I'll lighten some of this area. And again, you know, we've got the base here. All we would need to do is just play around with it, add some details, add some extra shapes, and we're going to have a little painting. Okay, a very basic little painting, because I'm not going to spend much time on it, but you can see how from almost nothing, as long as that continuous big shape is there, I'm going to find myself with a cute little subject. Okay, the rest is in the details. The rest is really just a question of detail, but that structure is there in the beginning. So it creates that solid base. And then from there, it's just details. It's just smaller details. That's all it is. So if you can focus on how you connect the shapes, all of the shapes, you actually bring them into one giant continuous block that connects all of the different foreground, background, middle ground, and the various, let's say, intermediate shapes of the painting. You connect them into one block. You can't go wrong. You actually almost can't mess up the painting. It becomes almost foolproof. And when you do that, but you know what, even if you've got a messy technique, even if you know, your drawing or your perspective or, you know, anatomy, if it's a portrait, is not spot on, but you'll be forgiven, basically, because the rest of the painting just works. There you go. So that's the idea of structure. We're going to be working a lot on structure, but also on the brushwork that goes on top of this in next Monday's live. So next Monday's live, we're going to be working on an image of Mont Saint-Michel in France. And the idea of this week's lesson is to focus on the structure, but with a really interesting design, because here what I'm showing you is just very linear. Not necessarily very interesting, but it definitely works. However, as we move onto higher levels of structure, we're going to want to create a more interesting design, a more interesting structure in our paintings, so that our paintings do actually have a little bit more of a, let's say, a unique and more interesting, bigger shape to them. On top of that, we need to work our brushwork, because the way that we lay our dry brushwork onto the paper is sort of like our signature style. It's what actually creates our unique style, if you like, because your brushwork is not the same as mine, and that's what actually makes the painting more personable. It looks like mine, it looks like yours, it looks like someone else's, exactly in the same way that handwriting does the same thing. So there you go. This is just a little video as a little warm-up. Go ahead and try and paint the same thing for what we're doing this Monday. This will be the 14th of March. So there you go. Have a try, and then I'll see you on Monday as we apply this to Mont Saint-Michel in France. Take care and happy painting.